Arthur Schopenhauer spent his entire life studying one thing: human suffering. Not how to eliminate it, how it operates, what drives it, why it's inevitable, and what he discovered was disturbing. Most people are not poor because of external circumstances. They're poor because they're trapped in a psychological structure that makes wealth impossible. It's not about money, it's about the architecture of desire itself. Schopenhauer called it the will, an insatiable, blind, purposeless force that drives all human behavior. You don't control it. It controls you, and unless you understand how it operates, you will spend your entire life chasing satisfaction that vanishes the moment you grasp it. This is why most people will stay broke forever. Not because they lack opportunity, because they're imprisoned by a formula for misery they don't even know exists. By the end of this, you'll see the cage you've been living in, and you'll understand why the wealthy escaped it, while everyone else remains trapped. Let's start with Schopenhauer's central insight. Desire is suffering. Not the fulfillment of desire, the desire itself, the wanting, the craving. The gap between what you have and what you think you need, that gap is hell. And most people spend their entire lives widening it. Here's how it works. You want something: a car, a house, a salary, a relationship, a status symbol. The wanting creates tension, dissatisfaction, restlessness. You're not at peace. You're in a state of lack. So you work toward it. You hustle. You sacrifice. You finally get it, and for a brief moment, maybe a day, maybe a week, you feel satisfied. You think you've arrived. But then the satisfaction fades. The new car becomes ordinary. The house needs maintenance. The salary feels insufficient compared to your neighbors. The relationship has friction. And a new desire emerges, more intense than the last. Schopenhauer called this the pendulum of existence. You swing between suffering from want and boredom from fulfillment. There is no third position. There is no lasting satisfaction. This is the formula for misery. And most people are completely unconscious of it. The poor are trapped in the most vicious version of this cycle. They desire basic security, food, shelter, safety. And because these needs are never fully satisfied, they're in constant suffering. The desire never stops. The tension never releases. But here's what's perverse. When they do get a little money, a little breathing room, they don't escape the cycle. They just upgrade their desires. Now they want the nicer apartment, the better car, the designer clothes, the expensive vacation. They increase their standard of living to match their income, and the gap between what they have and what they want remains exactly the same. This is lifestyle inflation, and it's psychological poison. Schopenhauer saw this clearly. Wealth is like seawater. The more we drink, the thirstier we become. The satisfaction you're chasing doesn't exist at a higher income level. It doesn't exist anywhere on the material plane, because the problem isn't the money. The problem is the structure of wanting itself. Now let's talk about comparison. Schopenhauer understood something that modern psychology has confirmed. Humans don't evaluate their lives in absolute terms. They evaluate in relative terms. You don't feel poor because you lack necessities. You feel poor because your neighbor has more. You don't feel unsuccessful because you're objectively failing. You feel unsuccessful because someone else is winning more visibly. Schopenhauer wrote, "A man never feels the loss of things which it never occurred to him to ask for." Translation: your suffering is proportional to your awareness of what you don't have. Social media has weaponized this principle. Every scroll is a comparison. Every feed is a catalogue of things you don't have, lives you're not living, achievements you haven't reached. And with each comparison, the gap widens. The desire intensifies. The suffering multiplies. The poor are drowning in comparison. They see wealth constantly. They're surrounded by images of luxury, success, freedom, and every image reinforces their sense of lack. But here's the trap. Even when they get more, the comparison doesn't stop. It just shifts to a higher bracket. Now they're comparing themselves to people even wealthier. The gap never closes. The suffering never ends. This is Schopenhauer's formula at scale. Desire plus comparison equals permanent dissatisfaction. Let's go deeper. Schopenhauer believed that beneath all conscious desires is the will itself, a blind, purposeless force that just wants to perpetuate itself. It doesn't care about your happiness. It doesn't care about fulfillment. It just wants to keep wanting. Think about it. Why do you want what you want? Really, trace it back. Most desires aren't yours. They're implanted by advertising, by culture, by social conditioning. You don't want the luxury car because it transports you better. You want it because it signals status, because it promises the feeling of success, because other people will see you differently. But that desire didn't originate in you. It was manufactured and sold to you. And you bought it without questioning whether it would actually satisfy anything real. The poor are especially vulnerable to manufactured desire because they're in pain. And when you're in pain, you're desperate for relief. So when culture promises that buying this product, achieving that status, reaching this income level will finally bring peace, you believe it. But it won't. Because the promise is a lie. The desire is designed to be insatiable. The product is created to generate dissatisfaction that requires another product to temporarily relieve. This is the consumer trap, and it keeps people broke not just financially but psychologically. Schopenhauer had a dark view of human nature. He believed most people live entirely unconscious lives. They never examine their desires. They never question their goals. They just follow the will blindly, like animals driven by instinct. Man can do what he wills, but he cannot will what he wills. You think you're choosing your desires. You're not. They're arising from conditioning, from biology, from cultural programming. And you're just executing them automatically. The wealthy are different, not because they don't have desires, but because they've become conscious of the mechanism. They've stepped back from the automatic loop. They've created space between stimulus and response. When desire arises, they don't immediately act on it. They observe it. They ask, is this actually mine? Will fulfilling this create lasting satisfaction or temporary relief? Am I chasing the thing itself or the feeling I think it will give me? This is the beginning of freedom. Not the elimination of desire, the consciousness of it. Let's talk about delayed gratification. Schopenhauer would say, most people are broke because they're slaves to immediate relief. The tension of desire is unbearable, so they need instant discharge. They want something. They buy it immediately. Credit card, payment plan, doesn't matter. The satisfaction of acquisition is more important than the financial consequence. But here's what's actually happening. They're not buying the object. They're buying temporary relief from the discomfort of wanting. And that relief lasts about as long as the dopamine spike. Then the discomfort returns, often intensified by the financial stress they've just created. The wealthy have trained themselves to sit with discomfort, to feel the desire and not immediately act, to let the craving rise and fall without feeding it. This isn't moral superiority. This is psychological sophistication. They understand that most desires are temporary. If you wait, they pass. And the ones that persist, the ones that survive scrutiny, those might be worth pursuing. But most people can't wait. They're too identified with the desire. They think they are the wanting. So when it arises, they must act. And this impulsivity keeps them in financial bondage. Now let's address something uncomfortable. Schopenhauer believed that life is fundamentally suffering. That pleasure is merely the temporary absence of pain. That satisfaction is just the brief pause between wants. This sounds nihilistic, depressing. But Schopenhauer wasn't trying to depress you. He was trying to wake you up. Because once you accept that lasting satisfaction doesn't exist in the material realm, you stop chasing it. You stop organizing your entire life around the pursuit of permanent happiness through acquisition. And this is where the wealthy diverge from everyone else. They're not trying to buy happiness. They're trying to buy freedom from suffering. And there's a massive difference. Buying happiness is impossible. Happiness is a fleeting emotion that comes and goes regardless of circumstances. Chasing it is like chasing the horizon. The more you run toward it, the further it recedes. But buying freedom? That's achievable. Freedom from financial stress, freedom from being controlled by others, freedom from having to trade time for money, freedom from desperation. The poor chase happiness through consumption. The wealthy build systems that eliminate the primary sources of suffering. And in the absence of those pressures, something like contentment can emerge. Not because they have everything they want, because they're no longer tormented by wanting itself. Schopenhauer offered one escape from the cycle: aesthetic contemplation and denial of the will. Basically, transcending desire through art, philosophy, or asceticism. Most people won't take that path. It requires too much. But there's a practical middle ground, what Schopenhauer might call the reduction of will. You can't eliminate desire, but you can minimize it. You can consciously limit the number of things you want. You can reduce the complexity of your needs. You can create satisfaction from simplicity rather than excess. The wealthy understand this paradox. They have access to everything, but they want very little. Not because they're denying themselves, because they've realized that more doesn't equal better. They've tested the formula. They've acquired and experienced and consumed at levels most people can't imagine. And they discovered what Schopenhauer knew. It doesn't work. The satisfaction doesn't last. The peace doesn't arrive. So they simplify. They focus on the few things that actually matter: time, health, autonomy, meaningful work, deep relationships, and they let go of the rest. Meanwhile, the poor are still convinced that the next purchase, the next achievement, the next status symbol will finally be the one that brings lasting fulfillment. Here's the practical application. If you're broke, it's not just because you don't have money. It's because you're bleeding desire. Every want you have that you cannot afford is a wound. Every comparison you make to someone wealthier is a cut. Every advertisement you absorb is poison. And you're walking around hemorrhaging psychological energy into cravings that will never satisfy you. The first step to wealth isn't making more money. It's stopping the bleeding. Audit your desires. Write them down. Every single thing you want. Then ask, why do I want this? Where did this desire come from? If I got this, would I be permanently satisfied, or would a new desire immediately replace it? You'll find that 90% of what you want is manufactured, conditioned, implanted by external forces. It's not actually yours, and pursuing it will keep you trapped. Next, eliminate comparison. Schopenhauer said, we forfeit 3/4 of ourselves in order to be like other people. Stop consuming content designed to make you feel inadequate. Stop following people whose success makes you feel like a failure. Stop measuring your life against anyone else's. This doesn't mean ignore reality. It means stop letting other people's realities define your satisfaction. Your life is not a competition. Your worth is not determined by relative position. The wealthy have learned this. They don't care what their neighbors think. They don't care about public perception. They've stopped playing status games, and in doing so, they've freed themselves from the most exhausting source of desire, the need to impress. Third, build systems, not lifestyles. This is where Schopenhauer's philosophy intersects with financial strategy. Every dollar you spend on lifestyle is a dollar you've converted from capital to consumption. It's gone. It gave you a moment of relief, and now it's gone. But every dollar you invest in systems, in assets, in income-generating structures, is a dollar that continues working. It compounds. It multiplies. It creates freedom. The poor spend everything they make trying to satisfy desires that regenerate instantly. The wealthy delay gratification long enough to build machines that eventually satisfy desires effortlessly. This requires sitting with discomfort, feeling the desire and not feeding it, watching others enjoy what you're denying yourself, living below your means, while everyone around you is inflating their lifestyle. But this temporary suffering buys permanent relief. Because once the systems are built, once the assets are generating, once the foundation is solid, you're no longer fighting the will. You've created space between yourself and its demands. Schopenhauer also wrote about boredom. The other side of the pendulum. When desire is temporarily satisfied, you don't feel peace. You feel boredom, emptiness, meaninglessness. This is why the poor, when they get money, often make terrible decisions. They're not equipped to handle the absence of pressing desire, so they create new ones. They buy things they don't need. They inflate their lifestyle. They fill the void with consumption. The wealthy have learned to be comfortable with boredom. They don't need constant stimulation. They don't need perpetual novelty. They can sit with emptiness without panicking. Because they understand that boredom is just the mind looking for the next desire to latch onto. And if you don't feed that impulse, if you just let it be, it passes. And in that space, something deeper can emerge. Purpose, meaning, creativity, contribution. Things that don't arise from desire but from its absence. Let me address the elephant in the room. Some people will hear this and think, so we should just give up? Stop wanting anything? Become monks? No. Schopenhauer isn't advocating for the elimination of life. He's advocating for consciousness about how life operates. You will have desires, that's fine. But know what they are. Know where they come from. Know which ones serve you and which ones enslave you. You will pursue goals. That's fine. But pursue them from awareness, not compulsion. From choice, not conditioning. From genuine preference, not manufactured need. The difference between the wealthy and the broke isn't that one group has no desires. It's that one group is conscious of their desires and the other is possessed by them. Here's the formula Schopenhauer identified. Unconscious desire plus constant comparison plus immediate gratification, plus lifestyle inflation, equals permanent poverty. Not just financial poverty, psychological poverty, the poverty of perpetual dissatisfaction, the poverty of never being enough, having enough, achieving enough. This is why most people stay broke. Not because of lack of opportunity, because they're structurally designed to be dissatisfied. Their psychology guarantees misery regardless of external circumstances. And here's the darkest part. The economy depends on this. Consumer culture requires dissatisfaction. Advertising is designed to create want. Products are engineered to become obsolete. The entire system profits from your perpetual unfulfillment. You're not struggling against individual weakness. You're swimming against a trillion-dollar current designed to keep you wanting, buying, consuming, and never satisfied. So what's the escape? Schopenhauer would say, recognize the will for what it is, a blind, purposeless force. Don't identify with it. Don't believe its promises. Don't organize your life around satisfying it. Instead, minimize desire. Simplify needs. Build systems that generate resources without consuming your life. Create freedom from necessity. And in that freedom, find meaning in something beyond acquisition. The wealthy discovered this not through philosophy but through experience. They chased satisfaction through consumption and found it empty. So they changed strategies. They stopped chasing happiness and started building freedom. They stopped trying to satisfy every desire and started eliminating unnecessary ones. They stopped competing for status and started creating value. And in doing so, they escaped the formula for misery that keeps everyone else trapped. The brutal truth is this: most people will never make this shift. They'll spend their entire lives on the pendulum, swinging between the suffering of want and the emptiness of temporary satisfaction. They'll die, having never questioned whether the game they were playing was worth winning. But you're here, which means somewhere in you there's a recognition, a suspicion that maybe the conventional path leads nowhere, that maybe the desires you're chasing aren't actually yours, but maybe there's a different way. Schopenhauer offers you the diagnosis. You're trapped in a formula for misery, desire that can never be permanently satisfied, comparison that can never be won, consumption that can never bring peace. But diagnosis is the first step to cure. You can't solve a problem you don't understand. And now you understand. The wealthy aren't wealthier because they make more. They're wealthier because they want less. They've broken the formula. They've stepped off the pendulum. They've created enough space between themselves and their desires to make conscious choices. And that consciousness is worth more than any dollar amount. Because it's the only thing that actually brings relief from the suffering Schopenhauer spent his life studying. So here's your choice. You can keep playing the game you were taught, chase the next thing, buy the next thing, compare yourself to the next person, inflate your lifestyle, stay on the pendulum, remain broke, if not financially, then psychologically. Or you can break the formula, become conscious of your desires, question where they come from, eliminate what doesn't serve you, build systems instead of lifestyles, create freedom instead of chasing happiness. The first path is guaranteed misery. Schopenhauer proved it. Psychology confirms it. Your own experience probably validates it. The second path is difficult. It requires going against every message you've been fed. It requires delayed gratification in a world demanding instant satisfaction. It requires simplicity in a culture worshipping excess, but it's the only path to freedom. Not from desire itself, but from being owned by it. And that freedom is what separates those who stay broke forever from those who build something that lasts. Schopenhauer saw the cage. He documented its structure. He showed you exactly how it operates. Now the question is, will you stay in it? Or will you finally step out?